Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the grand finale of the DEFCON Aftermath series. We're taking a look at defenders, controllers, and knockdown, drag-out competitions against incarnate level challenges. Trying to figure out once and for all which of these classic archetypes from the City of Heroes is the superior supporting archetype. And in DEFCON 5, the previous series, I learned that controllers edged out our defender champions by a hair, by a smidge, by, I don't know, 5% maybe, 10% at most. And it was mainly due to their perma-pets, or at least nearly perma-pets. But here in DEFCON Aftermath, against even more difficult challenges, I'm trying to figure out if the defenders' buff number superiority, that extra 5, 10, 15% they have on their buffs, debuffs, their supporting numbers, if that makes a difference. And in order to answer the question, I raised the bar to take on incarnate level challenges, enemies that are found in the AE801 custom missions designed by a user named Linnea. And here we are at the final matchup, number 5, Trick Arrow. And so far, spoiler if you haven't seen the other ones, I have discovered in the previous 4 that 3 of them have gone to the defenders. And one wasn't really that close, Empathy. The other 2 were pretty close, but still rather decisive. And I think just the very first one, Cold Domination, went or was edged towards the controller. So right now the defenders are up 3-1. So will that hold true for this final matchup of Trick Arrow, or will the controllers regain some of their past glory? And then what I'm going to ultimately do is somehow, some way combine the stats from DEFCON 5 with DEFCON Aftermath. So we will be looking at 10 different support sets, 10 different combinations across 50 missions each archetype. I mean, 100 total missions? Dang, that's a lot. All that data, and we're going to crunch those numbers. We're going to try to answer that question. Is there some signal amongst the noise that indicates one or the other archetype is better? Or is it situational? Does it depend on the team? I don't know. There's lots of questions. But before we answer all that, let's hammer down on Trick Arrow. So our last comparison set is Trick Arrow. And if you don't know anything about Trick Arrow, it is chock full of debuffery and soft control. You have Trick Arrows tipped with an odd variety of payloads, which, if used strategically, can dramatically alter a battle site. I agree with that. So, hey, what are we talking about here? We've got ourselves Entangling Arrow. This has some slow, some minus fly, some immobilization, and I don't know when, but even some minus damage resistance was thrown in there at some point. So this is a naughty little arrow against a single target anyway. And then Flash Arrow, targeted AoE. It explodes with a flash of brilliant light, minus to hit, minus perception against the enemy. Then we got Glue Arrow. This is a location AoE, so you're going to be dropping this thing in a little patch somewhere, and it is going to goo up the area, minus recharge, minus speed. Ice Arrow, single target, foe hold, minus recharge, minus speed, minus damage. Again, I'm not 100% sure when that was added. Poison Gas, PGA, another nice little targeted AoE. By the way, the difference between location, AoE, and targeted is targeted, it's a patch. Sorry, location is a patch. Targeted is you shoot the dude with it and it explodes around them in an AoE to cause these effects. So I believe one has a to hit check, the other does not. So PGA, you hit a target and it pops gas around it, putting people to sleep, and some more minus damage. Then we've got ourselves Acid Arrow, another one of these targeted AoEs. So you center mass on a group, you pump an arrow into the main guy, he explodes with DOT toxic damage, and then you get some splash, minus defense, minus resistance on that. And then we've got our vaunted Disruption Arrow, maybe the unsung hero of this set. Another one of these patch location AoEs. Bunch of minus damage resistance and minus maximum endurance. I'm not sure when max endurance was added to this arrow, but it's there now. Oil Slick Arrow, maybe one of the most famous of your trick arrows. Famous because it didn't work for, I don't know, a couple years, I think, when it first came out. You never could light your oil slick on fire. So anyway, Oil Slick Arrow does some knockdown, some minus speed, some minus defense, and then it is combustible. It will ignite as long as you hit it with some fire or energy damage. And then everybody in it starts taking a bunch of damage. Duh. EMP then is your big tier 9. Big old targeted AoEs. Another hit the main guy, blast him with it, explodes around them. It has a hold, and then it does some special weird stuff. One is minus endurance, which is kind of a big deal on this thing. It can take out about half a group's endurance, or half the endurance of a group. It also does damage against enemies with the robot tag. But the big thing now that was added is actually it has a buff feature to it. It creates a little dome of protection, if you I guess you want to think about it that way. And the people, your allies standing in it, get some damage resistance. They get some mez protection. So it's an interesting power in that, do you use it on your enemies to get the big old minus endurance and hold, or do you kind of use it on yourself and drop it near you? Only problem is it is a targeted AoE, although again, I think some of these might be misleading because I could have sworn EMP's actually location. I don't think it is targeted anymore. I think you need to drop it on a patch area. We'll check that in the game. But anyway, so there you go. You got a whole mixed bag of tricks here. And that's what makes it fun, powerful, and it also kind of makes it hard to use because you got this combination of you shoot somebody directly with a single target thing, you shoot somebody directly with an AoE splashy exploding thing. You got these patchy things you can drop around corners, right? You've got a lot of options here. And really, you kind of need the whole package in order to really be effective at debuffing because each one of these things brings a little bit extra to the table. But as I just glancing down through this list, I do see some common things that you can build around. For instance, you do have some mobility and movement debuffing. As I glance down through here, look at this. We got some minus speed, minus recharge, minus fly, slowing stuff down. Here's some more, some knockdown, speed, right? We got lots of ways to debuff movement. And that's probably one of the big things that Trick Arrow is good at doing. And then you've got some additional little naughty things, such as this minus damage aspect here. Ice arrow, poison gas arrow. Maybe you can leverage that a little bit. You then have some more traditional debuffy kind of things like minus defense, minus defense, minus resistance, minus resistance. Not so much in the minus to hit. There's really just this area here. You got a little bit of control with the immobilizes and the holds. So a lot of things you can do here with this set. A lot of things you can build around and maximize. Now, hey, what did I do with it? Of course, is one of the big conversations today, and also what's going to go on with these subsequent follow-up videos as I look into my Defender controller build. But before we do all that, let's kind of dive deeper on some of these powers here so we can see what the numbers really look like, because a lot of the stuff, you glance through this, you're going, oh yeah, I can really leverage this minus speed, this minus movement stuff. But if the percentages are really low, then it's not very effective as a strategy. So we want to go ahead and make sure that we can actually augment some of this stuff and maximize it, combine it, get some synergies going so that it actually is worth building around. So let me go ahead and pull up City of Data and we'll see what we've got. All right, here we go. A little side-by-side action between our Defender and controller. I haven't done it this way before, but I want to take a deeper dive on this AT comparison this time around. So we got our Defender over here, and we've got our controller over here. And it's the same power sets as you can see. The big difference is hey, what levels are you when you get things, at least initially from a build perspective, when are you going to get which power? And then the other thing about this, what we want to see is what are the percents behind the powers? What are the numbers? Because we know a couple things. We know defenders get their support stuff earlier levels, which matters as you're leveling up, matters as you're slotting your powers, that sort of thing. And they have better raw numbers. And that's what I want to look at with City of Data. For controllers, it's a secondary set, so they're going to get things a little bit later. And they're not going to have the same sheer raw percentages on a lot of these powers. But another thing that is true is that some of the things in these support sets are the identical numbers between the two archetypes. So there's really no difference. So in some sets, you may find a lot of powers that are different. In other sets, you might find only a few. And one other thing that is also true is that controllers do get better control numbers. So powers that have a hold or immobilize, something like that, they're typically better for controllers, maybe longer duration. They also can set up their containment, which is going to give them some bonus damage. So if we kind of look at this set, we've got a lot of debuffing, which I think is going to lend itself to the defender version. Then we have a few controls, so that's going to be a little bit more beneficial for controllers. And that's one thing that you can look at Trick Arrow for as a controller is because it does have a lot of light control, soft control, a couple hard controls in here. You can pair this nicely with a weaker primary. There are some primaries that don't have like just raw control. Something, let's say, like a fire control is not very overpowering in the control side of things. So you could take something like that and pair it up with a Trick Arrow and really boost up your ability to lock targets down. Maybe, I don't want to say gravity, was more of a weaker primary back in the day. It's gotten much better lately, but it is still a bit of an attacking, aggressive, offensive control set. So this gives you a little bit more juice that you could pair up with it to boost up your ability just to lock down an entire battlefield. So there's different reasons why you would build one versus the other. Now for my tests, I've done both, and I have paired them with different primaries and secondaries. So we'll see what I've done and what I'm going for here. But let's take a look at the numbers across the board. We've got Entangling Arrows, our first one. And from the defender side of things, it looks like this. Kind of scoot this up for you. We've got a Mag 3 immobilize. We've got some minus jump. We've got some minus running speed. We've got some minus damage resistance. So, pretty plain kind of a power, except for the minus resistance. Let's see if the controller numbers are better, worse, or what. Let's scoot this down. Here we go. So if we look across the board, here's what I'm talking about right here. You can see immediately your controllers have a longer duration on their immobilize. So it's about a 30% boost from 10 to 13 seconds. The debuff of the jumping, the running speed, all that stuff is the same. Here is your other difference. This on the defenders is 20%. This on the controllers is 15%. So just like I was pointing out, your defender version has an extra 5% damage resistance debuffing, whereas the controller version has an extra 30% on the control immobilize side. The question, of course, becomes, does that matter? Which would you rather have? Be able to immobilize something longer or be able to do an extra 5% damage on a single target? I suppose it depends on who you talk to. But those are the little nickels and dimes that we're going to be trying to get to the answer of whether it matters or not. Because in the 80, not the 801s, but the original DEFCON 5, when I was taking on 54 times 8 enemies, standard radio paper kind of mission content, these differences, at least the superior buff numbers for the defenders, really didn't matter. The defenders, yeah, were doing a bit more damage, but when you factored in the pets on the controller side, that extra percentage of buffs seemed to not matter because the pets were contributing their own damage, their own debuffs, their own controls. And I would also argue that the extra control really didn't seem to matter too much either. At least it wasn't necessarily quantifiable by the testing. Did it help contribute to the controllers to a degree? Yeah, because I think it sets up their containment, which allows them to do extra damage, which then helps them stay close to the defenders because overall the defenders were out damaging the controllers in a just character to character comparison. But when you put in the pet numbers, that's when it pushed it over the top for the controllers in some scenarios. But I think maybe the extra controls with the extra containment damage does at least keep it close if you go body to body kind of matchups. But now what I've been seeing here is in these 801s where we're taking on incarnate level foes. Again, it's still at 54 times 8, but these guys are much tougher. And what I'm seeing so far is the pets are really not a factor for either controller or defender. They're being killed pretty quickly. They have to be resummoned a lot more. Just their damage is not doing as much as it used to. And whether or not they're acting as tanks or aggro magnets and maybe lowering incoming damage for controllers, that's something that's hard to determine, but it could be true. But what I am thinking is going on is that these 5%, these 10%, these small little defender numbers are having an impact here at the 801 level because they're increasing damage output, survivability, those types of things against these much more challenging foes. And I think I'm seeing it in a team-wide protection, team-wide support role. So that's just something to keep your eye out or think about as we go and look at some more of these numbers. Flash Arrow. Let's take a look at Flash Arrow's numbers here. What do we got for this one? Anyway, Entangling Arrow, just FYI, I mean, it's not like you could skip that power. It's not going to make or break you. It is nice to have it as far as like a focused target because you get that minus resistance stuff. But I think, in the grand scheme of things, does it kind of keep you alive? No. Is it probably better with a controller because you can't get the containment stuff. You can stack immobilizes. I don't think a defender it's that important. All right, let's take a look at our debuffing Flash Arrow here. I'm just trying to see something else I didn't look at was just the numbers. Does it cost more? Does it cost less? It seems like it's the same numbers across the board here. You've got this power has a 35-foot radius. I do want to point that out. So when you target somebody, you do need line of sight, by the way. So line of sight, you have a target. It does have an accuracy, but the minus perception stuff is auto hit. The accuracy, I think, only matters for PvP scenarios where somebody can miss somebody. Also, things with accuracy tend to have to hit rolls, and to hit rolls then can be leveraged for most, if not all, of the damage procs, that sort of thing as well, which we'll get to at the builds. But anyway, they're pretty much the same exact power, from the outside, from the numbers as far as activation goes. But let's see what they do mechanically affect, and I can see immediately there is a difference between the two. They do have the same debuff of perception of 450 feet. So in other words, if and this is something to be aware of because here is your foe, your enemy, and when you hit them with the flash arrow, it reduces the range of their visibility, their perception. Now, I don't know what the raw perception distance is for an enemy. I know in the 801s it's pretty freaking far because a lot of them are using targeting drone and stuff. But let's just say, for instance, the normal perception is 500 feet. So if you're within 500 feet of them, they see you and they will aggro and want to attack. But what this power is doing is cutting their perception down by 450 feet. And now they're only able to see, let's say, 50 feet if my math is right. Now, again, I don't know the upper limit of this. Again, the 801 foes are further than the standard, mooks out there. They go much further. So how much exactly this is going to cut them back? Does it matter? Like if their perception is 1,000 feet and I'm cutting it back 450. That's not a huge, improvement, but it does benefit you, right? You can get a little bit closer to the enemy and not aggro as soon. Just one thing you gotta watch out is this has got to be your first strike, and this will come into play during strategy kind of talking, because if you're with your group of allies approaching an enemy, you need to be the one who alphas with this thing so that you can get the debuff. And a lot of times that's difficult if you're, especially, you're playing pugs or whatever, nobody really gives a darn about your powers. They just run in there, charge in there, whatever, so you don't really ever get a chance to make use of the minus perception. It's good for positioning. I think it really helps on these 801s where you can blind the enemies somewhat so you can get a little bit closer, get yourselves in a more optimal location, and then begin attacking. So, but it's got to be aware that you got to be the one to first hit. And it's not going to placate enemies. So if you've already attacked them and then hit them, they're still going to be aggroed. But the big difference here with the defenders is they're getting an extra, what percent is that? Like 30% or something like that, roughly. So it looks like their perception, or their to hit debuff is about 30% better if my math is right. Maybe 25%, something like that. 25, 30%. I don't have the exact numbers in my head here, but I'm glancing, it looks about that. So it is going to be an effective tool here. Both of these would be slottable, right? You can slot for minus to hit, debuffing. The one thing you could do, or might want to be careful about doing, is there are some damage and debuff procs in minus to hit powers. Like Clouded Senses, for instance, does have a negative damage. The problem is if you put a proc in there of any kind, it triggers. It triggers an alert. So the enemy, even though we're originally relying upon this minus perception to sneak around, if you hit them with one of these procs, it's going to trigger the alert. They're going to start attacking. So it's kind of, if you do that, you get some extra damage, which is cool, or extra debuff. But you're then going to just trigger the aggro and get rid of this whole bonus of the minus perception in the first place. Your minus to hit still goes through, so that is still in play. All right, that is your second power that you can use for these guys. Glue Arrow is your third one. Let's see if there's any differences here. And if we scan through Glue Arrow, I love Glue Arrow. We've got a 60-foot range on this thing, so you want to start paying attention to that too. So Flash Arrow, 80-foot range, right? Now we've got Glue Arrow. You're going to be closer, 60-foot range. And depending as the defender, what blast sets you're pairing this up with, a lot of your TA stuff is a little bit short range. So if you're pairing it up with some long range stuff, like, I don't know, Psy Blasting, I think has a pretty good range on it, then, it's going to kind of be harder to use. All right, so both of these things are creating a 60-second duration patch, which is this glue patch. And so what do the numbers do? This is what we want to see here. So first things, we're creating a 25-foot AoE radius patch. So that's pretty sizable. And you can see the numbers here. If we scoot over, stuff looks roughly the same. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, these powers are identical between the two archetypes, right? You're getting the minus movement with the fly debuffing, the recharge debuffing, the run speed debuffing, the jump height debuffing. All those things are identical. So this is the same power whether you're a controller or you're a defender. So it's things like that, by the way, that I bring up because, as an example, one counter or one thing that defender diehards are going to go and tell you is that, oh yeah, the buff numbers are just better. That's why you want to pick a defender. They're just superior. Well, that's not always the case. There are powers like these that it's the same thing, so it doesn't matter. And I imagine a controller is probably this, or a corruptor is probably the same thing, and maybe mastermind's probably the same thing. So, as a defender, you're not getting any advantage by taking the defender version of Trick Arrow. You could just play corrupt or somebody else if, let's say, Glue Arrow was your thing and that was the only power you picked. So we want to take a look at these numbers, because if most of them are a wash, then maybe you go with a different archetype that has other skills that are going to be benefited by their inherent, let's say you're a corruptor, you're going to get the extra damage, that sort of thing. Anyway, let's continue. Glue arrow, same thing. Ice arrow, let's move on to ice arrow. I imagine ice arrow is going to be better for a controller. Looking at the ranges are the same, 80 feet, 18-second recharges on these things. Endurance costs are the same, 8528. Let's look at the actual numbers now. Scoot this over again. Here we go. All right, so this is a little bit scrambled up. Let's see if we can find it. So here is the debuffy numbers here and here. 37 jump height, 37 jump speed. Yep. 25 recharge, 25 recharge, 12.5 running, flying. Okay, so the same debuffing numbers to movement. We've got almost a 12-second mag 3 hold, minus 20% damage. Here, the controller's hold is longer by about 3 seconds. So again, we're looking at about a 30% increase in duration. But then they have lower damage numbers. So the damage debuff is better for your defenders by, I don't know, what's that, 30% or something like that, 20%. So it looks like it's about a 20% improvement or deficiency as you go this way. So it is stronger. So, there you go. Boom. Hey, I got that. But again, it's a single target. So, all right, I get a single target who with Entangling Arrow you're getting the extra, whatever it was, 5-10%, I forget, of the damage resistance. Here we've got Ice Arrow on a single target, 20% more, damage debuffing. Is that going to save you? Is that going to make the difference? Is that going to make a team rocking and rolling? Probably not. Soloing, yeah, I mean, definitely it's nice. But team-wise, that's not a big difference either. So as I'm glancing at these first 4 powers, really only one that seems to really stand out so far is Flash Arrow. The rest of this stuff is also interesting because if I'm reading this correctly, it has a minus special. Yeah, I think that's what that is. Let me scoot up. Is that what it says here? Oh, yeah. Okay, so if you look at the description, it says they can have their secondary effects weakened. So, in other words, minus special. So this is something that, okay, again, maybe this is interesting. Is there a difference, though, between the two groups? And I'm looking here, and I see, let me clear this stuff off because it's getting a little bit busy here. So if we look at the minus special effects here versus here, the defender numbers are better, right? Was that about a 30% improvement, something like that? 30% better. But again, single target only. So if you're taking on an AV, you're taking on an elite boss, then sure, that's great. If you haven't run the 801s yet, though, the 801s EBs are everywhere, especially once you get into tier 4s. It's like the entire mob is EBs. So having a single arrow be able to hurt the special of a single EB is not going to help you very much again. Now, if you can start pumping these things out like a machine gun, then sure, that's going to be nice. But as a defender, that's not what you're going to bread and butter here. AVs, this could be very nice. A single target AV, start lumping them with Entangling Arrow and your Freezing Arrow. But the current game, the AVs, at least the old school AVs, they really don't have too much special stuff they're doing anyway. But it is nice, right? It's gonna lower their ability to heal, their ability to move, their ability to do controls, their ability to have their defense numbers, their to hit buffing. So it is a pretty nasty minus special. I'm not gonna lie. You're taking out 2/3 of their specials. That's pretty freaking good. But single target. All right, moving on. What else we got after Ice Arrow? We got Poison Gas Arrow. I really like Poison Gas Arrow. I think it originally was just a sleep, but Trick Arrow got some buffing. I don't want to say not long ago. It was a while back. I forget. I think it was a homecoming thing. But anyway, it did get a nice buffing to add some additional nastiness to it. Like this minus damage, I think, is something that was newer that was added to the game, or not to the game, but to this power. So let's take a look. Here's something that's really starting to bug me though. Look at the range here, 70 feet. Can we get some consistency on these ranges, guys? I don't understand this. Let me go back and look. Entangling Arrow, range was 80. Flash Arrow, range is 80. Glue Arrow, range is 60. Ice Arrow, range is 80. Poison Gas Arrow, 70. Can't we make them all 80? Or single targets are 80, AoEs are 60, some consistent number. I don't know about the other ones so far, but if I got to start, it just causes extra complexity in the game as you're trying to position yourself and use your abilities. Like, oh, that one's not long enough. I got to move. Why? Why is that the extra little silliness? Why not just have them all the same? Now, they're different by type of things, AoE, single target. Okay, I'm okay with that. But it doesn't make sense that the rest of this is different. All right, let's take a look here. So, first thing, you get a 60-second damage debuff for the Defender version, 60-second damage debuff over here for controllers, but this is 5% more damage debuffing. Okay, so we got another little bit of edge for the Defender. Now this one is actually going to matter more because this is AoE stuff. We can hit the center target and then it splashes. Now does it have the splash range? It says it's a 25-foot radius. So poison gas, you target somebody, you need line of sight, you hit them. It does look like it needs an accuracy check, so it does have 1.5 accuracy. So that's good. So you can get that up to 2, you'll be solid hitting targets. And in a 25-foot radius around the dude. So you want to try to hit the center guy of the pack. And if you do that, you're going to get minus 25% to, what's our target cap? Target cap 16. So you can get a whole bunch of guys with this power as long as you target correctly. This is going to be the trick to this power, right? Is if you got a pack of guys that you're trying to hit with this thing, and you're over here shooting with your little bow and arrow, and you hit this guy, right? The 25 feet only might cover this, and you got a lot of wasted space. So you're going to want to try to shoot center mass, hit this guy, and then get the cloud to get everybody. It's just hard to target that in a mass confusion scenario of combat, right? Because you've got your guys are up in the mix, you got enemies are up in the mix, people are moving, things are shuffling around, and if you don't have elevation, all you're seeing are bodies straight in front of you. So how do you, your depth perception, right? How do you target that exact guy? Because you have target nearest, target furthest as auto, buttons you can set up with your keybinds, that sort of thing. But there's no target middle. You have to manually find this guy and click on him with your cursor, right? That's the way to get it done. But again, things are moving, things are bobbing and weaving. The reticles are overlapping as you're trying to see people, and trying to just get that one guy in the middle is really tough. So if you can hover or get elevated position, that's going to be a better scenario for you. And then what is this? Oh, this must be the sleep effect. So, okay, the sleep, I imagine, is going to go to the controller. Let's see if this is true. So the controller, yeah, I mean, it's not huge, right? I mean, the sleep itself, it's a Mag 2 sleep. They're getting an extra 0.3. I mean, this is almost like non-existent, really. Like, why have a sleep it's that weak? Unless it, like, constantly re-ticks or, that sort of thing, or somebody walks into the cloud later. Is there duration on this thing? I don't think it's a lingering cloud, if I remember. It does have the 25-foot radius, but I don't think it lingers. So the fact that they're sleeping for a second and a half, not even 2 seconds. So something like this is an example. This wouldn't be worth slotting for sleep. Like, why? It doesn't even have like the deep sleep mechanic, if I'm reading this correctly, the new improved versions of sleeps. So to slot this for sleep or use it as a control really isn't going to help you. But you can use it for some. There are some sleep set procs you could use. An example, the chance to heal in oh gosh, I forget the name of the one sleep set. So something like that you could use, you know. But otherwise, enhancing it for sleep doesn't make any sense, in my opinion. All right, that's PGA, Poison Gas Arrow. Anything else we have? Yes, we've got Acid Arrow. Let's take a look at Acid Arrow. Acid Arrow, I like this for some reason, even though it's probably not a great sort of the way it works is not a good power. Look, we got another 80-foot range attack. Okay, so we've changed our range to 80 here. 20-second recharge, 7, 8 endurance, 15. Here's another weird thing about these powers is when you do hit, some of our AoEs have been 25. This one's only 15. So what's up with that? Why is there different ranges? We've got 3 ranges so far, 60, 70, 80. And now we have at least 2 different splash radiuses, 25 and 15. And I got to worry about single target, AoE target, and patch versions. So to me, Trick Arrow is unnecessarily complicated by things like that. You know, okay, I get single target AoE patch, but can't we standardize this a little bit? Can't we standardize this so it's not so much I need like some on the fly algorithm to figure out what's happening when and where, and you know, plus each one does different things, so you're trying to figure out, hey, do I hit with this arrow first, that arrow, do I need debuff, do I need defensive debuffing, do I need offensive debuffing, do I need control, right? All these things are you need like a computer to do all this math for you to figure it out. It's all situational. That's why I usually Trick Arrow, I'm just gonna like just dump everything. I'm just gonna punish people, just pumping arrows into them. I really don't care what they do. Just hit them with everything. All right, let's take a look at the matchup, though. What are we getting here? We're getting some toxic damage. So it looks like defender toxic numbers are a little bit stronger. So the DPS is a little bit better, not a ton here. Then you got 25% defense debuff versus 20. Minus 40% resistance debuffing, endurance resistance, to hit resistance, regen, recovery, recharge, and then it also lowers healing. All right, so it's basically debuffing the crap out of an enemy's ability to keep their green and blue bars up. Also messes with the recharge. So this thing does a lot of like naughty little abilities. So here's what it says it does. It reduces the target's defense, which is what originally it just did that, if I remember. And then their resistance to debuffs. Okay, so it's not causing these things to go down. So it's not lowering endurance and stuff. What it's doing is it's lowering their resistance to debuffs of those things. So if you hit them with acid and then you hit them with an endurance debuff or recovery debuff or recharge debuff, the enemy will suffer more from those subsequent debuffs because its resistance to them has been diminished. If I understand this correctly. So let's say I hit you with acid arrow. So that's 1. You get hit with acid arrow. It's going to mess up your defense and it's going to do some toxic damage. Then it's going to have these secondary effects. So we got toxic damage and minus defense. Then thirdly, it's going to debuff your debuff resistance, specifically endurance to hit, regen, recovery, recharge. So if then I hit you with a minus recharge attack of some kind, which maybe has a 10s, let's just throw this out here. It debuffs your recharge 10%. I don't know. This 40% debuff of your resistance to recharge debuffs means that this thing would actually be a 14%, so it'd be 40% better. So that's what it seems like it's talking about here. So I think acid being in one of your opening things, followed up by some of your other nasty stuff, is what you really want to do, because it's really just going to stack the crap on top of targets. Now, controllers have very similar scenario. They have containment, so they're going to do perhaps more damage than the defender, because if they're hitting a controlled target, boom, they're going to double their damage up on them. But then they have lower defense debuffing, so the defender version is a little bit better. Extra 5% debuffing on that. And then the other debuff is extra 10% better than the controller version. So this is definitely a win for defenders. So right now the defenders are getting some good debuff extras with their AoE stuff. So if you are a defender playing Trick Arrow, it's your AoE debuffing that is really going to make a difference. Oh, and another thing I want to point out is that I think these effects that Acid Arrow has about the minus resistance to specials and stuff, to debuffs, is the same effect you find now in the new Sonic Melee. Is it on here? I don't know if it's on CD of Data yet. Yeah, it doesn't look like it. But Sonic Melee has a minus resistance as well, but it is resistance to debuffing, not damage resistance. So just FYI on that, in case you're going, oh yeah, Sonic, it's just like the Sonic Blasting with minus damage resistance. It's not, from what I've seen. It's resistance to debuffing, which, you know, has limited use. Although in an 801 scenario, there are lots of enemies with debuffing and controls and that sort of thing. So having that ability to debuff them is actually pretty solid. Plus, it then makes your debuffs even better. All right, so I'm going to go to Arsenal Control. I want to go to Trick Arrow. Clicked on the wrong thing. Trick Arrow, where are you? There you are. Okay, so back to this Disruption Arrow. We got 3 more to take a look at. Disruption Arrow. This is, like I said a little bit earlier, this is the unsung hero in my opinion. Oh, look, another 70-foot range. Again, you know, I don't know, maybe there's some reason for it. Patches versus AoEs, targeted AoEs versus, you know, whatever. Who knows? It's too confusing. I don't see why it's necessary. All right, so you throw this out in a patch location, 45-second duration, which is really strong. You're gonna get this disruption effect. So here we go, 25-foot radius, 16 target cap. It lowers resistances, but here's the other thing I'm trying to get. So it doesn't say it up here, but in the effects description, it says max endurance is debuffed as well. So, all right, so here it says that damage resistance and max endurance of everybody in there. So anyway, I bring it up because this is new. I haven't seen this anywhere. Minus resistance, minus recovery. Is that just for the controller version? No? All right. So both of them have it. It looks like it. And so you're debuffing 2 things. There is the original, which was damage resistance, and it's really good at that. I mean, check this out. 40% damage resistance and 30% for the controller. So again, your defender gets the edge over here. It's, you know, 10% more. That's huge because it's an AoE, 16 target cap. It's in that big old 25-foot radius for 45 seconds or whatever. It then lingers up. So that's the other thing to think about, is even if they're not in the patch and they leave, I believe what this means is it's going to linger for 1.25 seconds. So while they're in there, this thing's sort of like pulsing away, and so the durations are 1.25 seconds. Now here's the other thing. It has this max endurance debuff of 625 and 550 on the other side. So again, defenders are doing better with these patchy AoE debuff numbers for sure. And the numbers are pretty significant, I'd say. We're not talking about small differences. A couple of them are small, but for the most part, that's a good sizable extra 10% damage you're doing to everybody in that area and for everybody on your team, right? So that's definitely gonna boost your damage output that the controller won't be able to match. But this is interesting. I was trying to figure this out. 625% endurance. So does that, I think it's that, I forget how that translates. Is that 62.5%? 6.25%? I don't know. I never understood the way this math works. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, let's say you got 100% endurance. I think the 6.25 it's 6.25% less max. So you're gonna bring this person down to, was that 93.75 total endurance? I think that's how it works. And then this guy is gonna be 94.5. So now here's the thing. I was messing around a little bit with mids on this because the other thing that Disruption Arrow now does is you can slot it for endurance modification sets, which before you couldn't. So that's something interesting that you could maybe leverage. Could you crank this up and maybe get this number to, I don't know, get it down to 80 some percent, Maybe if you could debuff it. So that's where I want to see. Because I was looking at this on mids and I was messing around putting some of the endurance set slots in there. Partially look at like procking them out. Because you could do, let's say, the plus endurance chances or the chance to heal. Throw that in your disruption arrow. So every time you fire this thing, it's going to proc some healing, maybe proc some endurance recovery. The problem is I don't know if it's on you or is it on the pseudo pet that it is creating, because it creates this, patch, right? And the patch is then the thing that is causing the debuff. So I don't know where the heal or the endurance would trigger, if it were to trigger at all. But anyways, looking at that, I didn't see anything happening to the numbers in mids when I was fiddling with this. Even though it takes the sets, it didn't seem any of the sets were actually doing anything to the max endurance. So what does that do? What does that mean? I don't know. It's just something interesting to test. So I'm going to have to do that myself and just see if it makes a difference or not. All right, so back to our choices here. What else we got? Oil Slick Arrow. This is, probably the really awesome, cool power in the set now that it's working. Another 70-foot range thing. Recharge is pretty long on this one, though. 3-minute recharge. Endurance cost is high, 15. What else is it? Then it's going to create the Oil Slick, which has a lot of weird info here. So the Oil Slick is created. Click on Oil Slick. And it's a 25-foot AoE, 16 target cap. That's pretty standard now. And it's going to have a knockback effect to it. Okay. So we got knockback for both of them. Same magnitude, it looks like. Then we got the same minus defense. So that doesn't make sense to me, because you would figure everything else has been better for a defender as far as the debuff numbers go. But here in this, big boy, you got the same thing, 25%, 25%. The run speed's the same, 350, 350, right? The knockback's the same. So this is the same power. This is just like Glue Arrow. So Glue and Oil Slick Arrow are the same exact power between the two. And those are two of their most, important arrows that you can stack on top of each other, gluing them so they're slow. The recharge is screwed. Now they're having some knockdown. You got minus defense on them. They're even slowed even more at this point. And then you can light this thing on fire and start cooking them. So it's a great combo, but the Defender version is the same thing as the controller version, so there's no benefit to it. And does it show the fire damage on this thing? Ignited oil. Here we go. So many sublinks you got to get into. Apply. Is this another one? How deep do we got to go down the rabbit hole here, guys? Fire. It's got to be this. 3.3. So it's three damage. I don't know how often it's ticking. Does it show duration? Yeah. Anyway, it ticks damage. I think it's 3 at a pop. Self-destruct. It does have an avoid to it, so just watch out for that. It's going to cause essentially a fear effect once it's ignited. Guys are going to want to leave, so they don't want to stand in it. So that's why if you stack with your glue arrow, they're pretty much screwed. They can't do anything. So yeah, you fire this up, light them on fire. Everybody's screaming. Everybody's taking damage. And it's ticks of damage, the 3 or whatever, for the duration of this power, which is fairly long. I don't know if I saw it anywhere how long this thing lasts. 30 seconds? Something like that. This is weird. Priority, be evil and do not move. Is that what they call it? Alright, so anyway, same power. Maybe the damage is better on the defender side, but I don't know. Let me trying to find this thing. Generate target. Oil slick target. Ignite oil. Ignited oil. Let's see. Should be this one. Fire. God, how many times I gotta click just to get to this power? Yeah, it looks like it's the same exact damage. Alright, so we got the same damage, the same debuff, the same everything with these two powers. So there's no advantage one versus the other. Take your pick. Alright, last one. EMP Arrow. This is sort of the weirdest arrow in the batch. Originally, it was just a big old AoE hold with damage to robots and minus endurance. But now it's got this buff to it. So it creates like a buff field. So you have a massive EMP. Allies that enter the field will see an increase to their damage resistance and against all damage except for toxic damage. And they're also protected by status effects, knockbacks, endurance drains, recovery debuffs, and recharge debuffs. So it's a debuff protector, status effect protector, damage resistance protector. And it'll affect enemy machines adversely, even powerful enough to affect synaptic brain patterns. It'll incapacitate all the foes in its radius. Machines and robots are more likely to take high damage. So it's doing all these things. It's like a catch-all power. And check it out, another 70-foot range. I think there's like 160-foot range power in this whole mix. So why not make that one 70? You know, I don't know. Recharge is huge, though. 5 minutes. Endurance is huge, like a quarter of your endurance. And here's another, look, 35-foot radius. So it's even bigger than all your other ones. So you got one small one that's 15 feet. I think it was acid. The other ones are 25. Then there's this one that's 35. So it's all over the map, this power set. Let's see what this thing does. Redirect to EMP Arrow. Here we go. EMP Arrow. Let's see if we can figure out if there's any differences here. All right, what do we got? Standard effects, endurance recovery for now. Here we go. So this is the buff part of it. So you're giving resistance to your allies of 30% for endurance and recovery debuffs or buffing, or against debuffs. So if somebody tries to drain your allies' endurance, they have resistance 30%. They also have damage resistance, 15 versus 11 over here. So the numbers are better for the defenders. Mez protection and Mez protection. All right, so as a buff, you're getting 30% versus 24% endurance recovery debuffing. You're getting damage resistance 15 versus 11 and a quarter. You're getting Mez protection for holds, stuns, and sleeps of like a mag 13 versus 10. Immobilized resistance of 6 versus 5. This is important. Knock up, knock back. This is very important for the 801. So there's enemies with repel and some knockback as well. So this actually is a very good buff. Problem is it's a buff. So you gotta, and I could swear that you have, this is a patch. Does it tell me? Line of sight. I got to check this out. I thought it was a patch. But anyway, so you get a bunch of, support from it. And then there's the debuffy side of things. Let's pull this up. Delete, clear this window here. So what do we got here? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at the debuffings. It looks like it's debuffing special, if I'm reading this correctly. So you're debuffing the special of your targets, right? You're debuffing their ability to heal, endurance, movement speeds, mez protection, and defenses. So strong debuff. Look at this on the defender. That's huge. 86 versus 69%. They're both big numbers, but it's even better on defenders. The endurance draining, the minus regenning is the same. Your damage output is a little bit better for defenders. It also has chances to hold look to be the same, although the controller version is longer durations of holding and a little bit lower damage. Okay. And then there's another, just like a double, I don't know if this is a repeat or whatever, but the electronic tag, the robot tag is what we're looking here. I'm not sure if it does like a double hold. Is that what that means? Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it does a lot of stuff. This is why it's such a weird power. It's tough to figure out exactly what this thing does, other than it's pretty freaking nice. So I like this power a lot. It's just using it is a little bit tricky because if you use it as a buff, a debuff, if your whole team's all in melee range with the enemy, that's great. The other thing is the staticky bubble it creates, I believe, is stationary. So once it pops, let me go back. Once it pops, oh, here it is. So it creates this entity for 240 seconds. So for 4 minutes, there's a staticky bubble EMP field that you create. And within that field, you've got this protection and the debuffing stuff. So outside of that field, though, it doesn't do anything. So it's, a nice tough battle's going on. You drop this bomb there, and you got to stand in it to get the bonus. But it's 35 feet, so that's pretty big. So it's not too hard to use it as a supporting buffing tool. But it's just, if you're playing 50 feet back, 60 feet, 70 feet, using your range to your advantage, because the shortest range trick area you have is 60. So you're outside of your radius if you're playing at range, especially as a defender where you have ranged attacks on top of that. And it's really the only power that would give you reason to go into melee would be this one. All the other ones you have no, it doesn't help you to go into melee if you throw down Disruption Arrow. And as a defender, usually you don't have anything to do in melee anyway. So maybe if you're playing electrical blast, you got short circuit, radiation blast, you got irradiate. Maybe it gives you reasons you have a nuke that's AoE, PB AoE. That might make sense. I don't know. But other than that, you really don't need to go in there. I think on a controller, it might be more useful in that sense because you could have melee control powers. Well, anyway, that, my friends, is Trick Arrow in all its glory. Lots going on. Really not much that you should skip or could skip. Yeah, maybe you skip Entangling Arrow. Maybe you skip Flash Arrow as your starter pick. But I would say of the two, probably Entangling is the least important. Although if you're soloing, I would say it's good to have it, get that extra minus resistance. But the rest of these arrows are pretty much you want them. Ice arrow, maybe you skip it as a, because you don't need a single target control, if especially as a defender, if you're no other holds in your repertoire. So what do you need this one for? So maybe skip it there. But again, if you're playing solo, single target stuff, bosses, that could be nice to minus damage. I think as a controller, you get more use out of Entangling Arrow and Ice Arrow because it'll help get you your containment set up, especially on bosses that you might two-shot hold, one with Ice Arrow, two with your primary hold, so you can get nice stacking there. So I think that's good. But really, all these arrows, I mean, you'll want them. But I think it's also this is more of a team set. I don't think running trick arrows as a solo is that great of an idea because a lot of this stuff takes a lot of setup, a lot of angles, a lot of positioning, and I don't think it's easy to do that solo when everything's trying to kill you. Everything's coming after you. If you're on a team and you got aggro split and you're able to kind of hang back and just let loose, then TA is money. Speaking of money, speaking of teams, let's get down to it. Who are my two contestants for Trick Arrow? Let's have our drum roll, please. Boom. Round 5 challengers. Defender. I've got Red Riding Hood, Trick Arrow, paired up with Fire Blast and Fire Mastery. She is an offender build. She's going to be using Trick Arrow to set up the enemy for just devastating blazes of fire, DOT, high damage, fire, unleash. So she's not going to be stacking, leveraging any sort of weird controls or debuffs. Although I could see defenders really leveraging the minus speed with, let's say you pair this with ice blast, or you pair it up with electrical blast to take advantage of that minus endurance, minus recovery stuff. You could definitely do a number on some enemies with a couple of other blast sets that have debuff associated with them. But I didn't go with it. I just want just raw damage. And I think I want to really just take advantage of all the slowing and the clumping and the paralysis, immobilizing, minus resistancing, whatever, and just unload once I've got them pinned in a spot. So definitely a high risk, high reward type of build. And then on the control side, we've got Project EXETER. I'm going to be using Arsenal Control for the first time. And Arsenal Control, if you go through the list of powers, is almost identical to Trick Arrow. So there's going to be a lot of overlap between what the two sets can do. Although Arsenal is obviously more based upon control and hard control, but it has a lot of the same tricks and gimmicks as Trick Arrow. So the two of them should stack up horrifically against the enemy. And then I'm even throwing in Mace Mastery because I want to go for complete redraw on this guy. I have every, weapon set, right? I've got a bow, I've got a gun, I've got a mace. So he's got lots of little tricks and toys and tools that he's going to bring together and land some pain on some people. So that, my friends, is going to be the matchup for this last round of DEFCON Aftermath. And I'm not going to say much more about these two characters until I get into their build videos, which will be next. We'll take a look at their mids build. We'll then run a little bit of solo action. And then we'll do the head-to-head team trials. Now, spoiler, I've already run Red Riding Hood's team action 801. I've already posted that up on my Twitch channel, so you haven't seen that yet. You can check out my link to the Twitch channel in my homepage links on YouTube. I've already run her, and I also have to say, spoiler, she's all that in a bag of chips. Okay, she is devastating what she was doing. Project EXETER, I've not yet run this guy at all. As a matter of fact, I pretty much just PL'd him up to 50 vet level 12 just for this exercise. So I've not played Arsenal beyond level 6. I played Trick Arrow plenty. But this guy, I have no experience with him. So I don't know exactly what he's going to do other than he's designed to be a debuff god, because I think debuffery is the key to beating these 801 trials, because they are just devastating to pets. They start just breaking through your controls. So I think if you can stack enough debuff on them, even though the defender numbers are better, pairing Arsenal and Trick Arrow together, I think is going to give him the edge in just raw debuffery with a smidge of control, setting up his teammates to do the rest. So that's, I think, the big difference. I think Red Riding Hood is able to set it up and knock him down herself, where EXETER's an ultimate setup, slow down, bog him down, line him up, and then sick the dogs on him type of controller. So I'm not sure what's going to happen yet. I have high hopes for EXETER here. So we'll see. We'll see if my strategy is right or not. All right. Going to cut it here. I appreciate you all tuning in and checking out the idea here. We're going to see in the next video. I'm going to go ahead and do the Red Riding Hood solo and build video. Then I'll follow it up with EXETER. Then I'll release the 801 trial to YouTube that Red already did. And then I'm going to wrap up the whole project there by running Project EXETER's 801s and bring it home with the grand finale analysis of all 5 defenders and 5 controllers who I ran in this Aftermath series, combining that with the original 5 defenders and controllers from the DEFCON 5 series, and come to the final conclusion for this whole mess so that we all know the answer. Who is better, defender or controller, at supporting a team? All right, we'll catch you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Peace out.